So what I thought would be kind of fun to do, it would be to go look at the Wikipedia page for the League of Women Voters, since many of us are here through our organization, and see what it has to say. It's not like looking at the League's page, of course, but let's go. I'm going to share my screen now that I have found it. But I also am sharing my screen to look at it to make sure that those special things, I hadn't looked at some parts of the page previously. So this is the League of Women Voters page. And this is just its regular article. It does have our updated logo, and it has it called it our motto, and it has the correct date for when we were founded. It has a very short history section, fairly short activity section and policy views, something about the governance, chapters and notable, but it doesn't have a lot of very modern things in this page. And pages can get updated, and I'm bringing this up for that reason. But I also want to go ahead and look at some of the things that John was talking about with regard to the behind the scenes part. So if we go here to talk, we can now see what parts of the wiki projects it's part of. So it's gender studies, United States government, firearms, women's history, elections and referendum, and wiki organizations. And then there's a long talk article here about the issue of nonpartisanship, and it's quite long, and it has lots of references. So this is the Wikimedians talking back and forth about an issue that they'd had an argument about. We can also look at the history here under view history, and it will say when the last revision was, and the last revision was last week, a minor edit to fix, it was like something to do with, instead of USPP, US government, that was in November, but they had one in March. So not a lot on this article, it's not changing a lot. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that anything here that's linked, you can get these little, the thumbnail about them. But under this, I didn't realize that you could bring the citations up like he showed. I always used to have to go down to the citation. It's nice to have it come up in those little, whatever they're called. And this page is not locked. There's no lock here. And so that would be the background, but that's just kind of looking at the League of Women Voters page. It would be interesting if the League wanted to, they could petition to have it updated significantly. And it might be interesting to add some of the more modern things that the League does. I mean, one of the things that's not in that page, for example, is all of the issues that we've been discussing around the 100th anniversary with regard to the racist background of the League of Women Voters and that controversy. That's not there at all. And I think that that might be something that would be useful from a gender studies perspective, and also from a historical perspective, and from a DEI perspective. Oh, sorry, thank you. I wasn't scrolling too fast. And Charlie, if you could say that out loud, because I can't see the chat when I'm doing that, that'd be terrific. So next time we are gonna, could you back the, or show the picture of the next episode? Okay, so next time what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about evaluating evidence. The next 3 segments are all about evaluating. And evaluating evidence is one of those things that requires judgment, and it's one of those things that's kind of tough sometimes. Charlie found a great article, which we're going to talk about next, which could be homework if you like homework. And then we're going to have a more general discussion, which is tips to help detect fake science news. And we're going to be looking at some other organizations to help do this. But I think these tips are very helpful. The article was originally in the media outlet called The Conversation, which is another least biased source that comes out of Australia. And I think one of the things that this episode talked about that I thought was interesting was the whole issue of how do we present information in an even-handed way? as much as possible. But what these tips talk about, that in science, science doesn't need sides. I think that's one of the things that as we go forward and as we talk about science, as opposed to policy. So you can have a policy, and the reason I'm bringing this up, because as we're talking about evaluation, we start talking about the issue of what words we choose. Something is good or bad, for example, hot or cold. Well, one of the best ways of thinking about this is something a lot of science teachers like to do, which is you have 3 bowls of water and you blindfold somebody. One bowl of water has water at 50 degrees. One has water at 70 degrees, and one has water at 90 degrees. And you have the person evaluate when they put their hand in the water, is the water cold or hot? And they don't know which bowl their hand is being placed into. So, you might start with 70 degrees from air, and that might seem cold. Oh, that's cold. And then you go back and forth. And the only true scientific fact about that is the temperature of the water. The evaluation of whether it's hot or cold, good or bad or whatever, has to do with the individual's evaluation. So there's a difference when you're talking about science. Science has specific, as we discussed last week, specific measurements for what makes something scientifically true or not, versus policy. And it's difficult to have a policy discussion if everybody in that discussion is not using the same set of facts. We maybe have never recognized that, or yes or no. Any comments or questions about Wikipedia or lateral reading as we move from this part of the crash course into the next part of the crash course? We will be talking about the difference is evaluation rather than lateral reading. So I'm going to be quiet and we have questions or comments. So next week, oh, go ahead, Marcia, sorry.
This is just a technical question.
Yeah.
When in the chat function, I know that you can save that.
Yes.
Which I have, but
yes.
I don't know where it goes.
That's a really good question. So
I know where that is.
Oh, good. Charlie can answer the question.
So in your downloads folder, there should be one called Zoom.
Oh.
And every time you say save the chat, it will save it by date in your Zoom folder.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
And if you can't find that Zoom folder, you can search for today's date. That's the other part is,
okay.
I'm trying to remember how the date does. And sometimes you can put the topic in, and it depends on what the meeting title is. What's the meeting title for this series, Charlie?
Using Wikipedia.
Using Wikipedia. So you could look under it as using Wikipedia. You can put the date there too.
Okay.
And to view this particular recording again, it's going to be on our YouTube channel in a few days at Kittitas League of Women Voters. And for the slides and links, Charlie has been sending out an email with everything here available. And to continue the discussion, we have a Facebook page where you can talk about it. The other thing is we're starting to try to figure out how this information could be collected and used by other leagues of women voters, maybe as a part of program meetings. So maybe or as part of your voters, possibly you could say this month's voter, we're going to talk about misinformation and disinformation. Look at this crash course video and then maybe something else. And you could include links to our PowerPoints and our things as a way of starting a discussion in your own league. So I don't know if people are interested in doing that, but it's part of the reason we set it up this way, so that the content could be used. You don't have to show the video as we've done. You could do it any number of other ways, but it could be a way of introducing a topic every month, every week, however you might want to do that on your Facebook page. So the information gets out there. And since the crash course video is relatively amusing to watch, and the discussion questions go along with it, it's another way of getting this part of what we practice as we become. is by having it in front of us on a regular basis. So if you're interested in collaborating with us on creating a toolkit, let us know. And thank you for coming. And we're going to stop the recording now, but we will hang out and put away the chairs for a few minutes if anybody wants to stay.